I'm Doug Silliman, president of the Arab Gulf States Institute. AGSI celebrates our 10th anniversary in 2025, and we will bring you analyses, programs, and special events to celebrate our first 10 years of work and our plans for the future. Today in this video, our scholars will give you analyses of the key issues that will affect U.S. relations with the Gulf Arab states in 2025.
This is the 10th anniversary of the Institute, and this year I'm going to be revisiting a theme that I looked at 10 years ago, and that was with the emergence of nationalism within the Gulf states. And I'm going to be looking at how that nationalism has developed, both in terms of how that's shaping these countries' foreign policy and engagement in the world, and its relationships with its own citizens. And it's going to be really interesting to look at that at the same time that we have a new nationalist realignment here in the United States as well under President Trump. So I'll also be taking a look at how those new American first policies are interacting with Gulf states and the impact on basically U.S. Gulf relations. For specific projects, I'm really interested in looking at thinking about Saudi's foreign policy and how it's changed, how Saudi Arabia is engaging much more multilaterally these days. As well, I'm going to be looking at Kuwait and some of the challenges that this new Kuwait first and more narrow version of Kuwait identity is reshaping relations with their own citizens as they narrow nationality and citizenship laws. And we'll also be looking at the arts, where this is an area where really nationalism is developed and the real content of what that means for people comes into play.
Perhaps ironically, a lot of what will happen in the Gulf will be driven by actions in Washington. I see three key U.S. policy issues to watch. First is U.S. policy toward Iran. Will it be a return to maximum pressure, or a push to negotiate a better Iran nuclear deal, or perhaps a combination of both of those? There are signs that Iran itself is ready to think about ways to change its approach to the region and the United States. So the Trump administration should be able to take advantage of that inclination, and in so doing, avoid an Iranian rush to a nuclear weapon. The second is U.S. policy toward Israel. While President Biden maintained historically strong support to Israel following the October 7th Hamas terrorist attacks, President Trump is likely to be even more supportive of Israel. One manifestation of this is likely to be an initiative to bring closure to a trilateral U.S., Israel, Saudi Arabia deal, but such a deal may require both Israeli compromise and a pathway to a Palestinian state, and significant American inducements to Saudi Arabia in the form of a new security agreement. And third is the U.S. general attitude toward the Gulf. Will the new administration focus solely on economic benefits? Will it push for greater Gulf self-sufficiency in defense, perhaps with more arms sales? Could President Trump's focus on increasing U.S. energy production undercut the power of our Gulf partners in world energy markets? But most importantly, will the Trump administration recognize and take advantage of the new economic, defense, and political opportunities offered by the evolving Gulf?
Over the year ahead, I'm excited to unpack the geoeconomics of Gulf-U.S. ties. I expect to look at 3 or 4 areas in depth. The first has to do with trade dynamics. The second has to do with investment flows. The third looks at ambitious technology agendas. And finally, strategic competition with China. On the trade front, I expect tariffs and also energy trade to play an important role in these evolving dynamics. On the investment front, we're likely to see sovereign wealth funds continue to play a prominent role in this space. On the technology front, Gulf governments and other actors are going to continue to accelerate their ambitious technology agendas, especially in areas like AI, and I expect them to receive full support from the Trump administration and many technology actors in the US. And finally, the Trump administration is likely to continue advancing an agenda of strategic competition with China, and that is absolutely going to impact Gulf officials and governments in and across the region. All of these areas present risks and opportunities facing Gulf countries and governments over the year ahead.
Saudi Arabia will press ahead with its efforts to diversify its economy during 2025. It will be doing so as Donald Trump has returned to the White House with policy pledges that could have important implications for the Saudi economy. I will be following three areas closely. First, policies that affect the oil market. Oil prices have already risen sharply in the first few weeks of 2025 as sanctions have been tightened on Russian oil exports. If President Trump toughened sanctions on Iranian exports as well, this would increase the chances of OPEC Plus being able to return production to the market this year, as it has announced it would do. This higher production would give an important boost to Saudi oil revenues. Second, policies that affect inflation. The imposition of widespread tariffs and expansionary fiscal policy in the US under a Trump administration could put upward pressure on inflation. This would limit the Federal Reserve's scope for cutting interest rates and could even see higher rates later in the year. This would make borrowing more expensive at a time when the Saudi public sector is continuing to borrow heavily. Third, policies that affect foreign investment. If the US imposes high tariffs on imports and these are matched by other countries in an escalating global trade war, this could reduce incentives for companies to produce overseas and thereby affect the foreign direct investment flows that Saudi is trying to attract. More so than usual, what happens in the US will be particularly important for the Saudi economy this year.
In the coming year, I'll focus a lot on the international relations of Gulf countries. I think one useful prism for understanding those relations is the political upheaval that has occurred in Syria. All the Gulf countries and other countries in the region are struggling to catch up with events in Syria. I think Qatar is probably the best position to exercise influence given its previous support for anti-Assad rebels. It will work, I think, with Turkey to exercise very significant influence. Saudi Arabia will also be a big player. UAE has been more cautious, but has indicated a willingness to work with the new government. Beyond Gulf countries, the United States should exercise a lot of power because of the leverage it has with its relationship with the Syrian Democratic Forces and the decision to lift sanctions.
The questions hovering over 2025 are very similar to those in 2024. How will conflicts that are ongoing, the conflict in Gaza, the conflict in Lebanon, the uncertainty over the new regime in Syria and the miniature conflicts going on there, plus the trouble with the Houthis in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, how will all of that affect the general trend that we had seen in recent years away from conflict and confrontation towards rapprochement and reconciliation? For Gulf Arab countries, it's very important to continue to focus their energies on a transformation of the economy to a post-hydrocarbon future. So they need security and stability. They need to avoid conflict and confrontation. The second question is, what, if any, deals will Donald Trump be able to secure? He has a fairly easy lift with Iran to get to a JCPOA, but better maybe with militias thrown in, and a much harder lift to secure a triangular agreement with Israel and Saudi Arabia, but both are out there for him, and it'll be extremely important which, if either, he decides to pursue. And all of that will shape the strategic considerations for Gulf countries in 2025.
When it comes to Iran-US relations in 2025, and for that matter, the next 4 years, I am expecting extreme outcomes. Revival of the maximum pressure campaign, US economic warfare against Iran, is a distinct possibility, but so is a grand bargain between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States.
We hope you found our analysis useful and compelling. If you liked this short video, check out our longer recorded program covering all of these issues and others in greater depth. Go to our website, agsiw.org, and search for Outlook 2025. Thank you, and thank you for supporting the Arab Gulf States Institute in our 10th anniversary year.